Well, an all too familiar sight. The old Scion getting a little bit more work done. At least it's going to be for the long term, because we got some control arms to change out. So let's get started. Yep, we're back again with the old Scion, but at least times have changed, and now I'm going to be able to actually start working on these cars to catch up on some of the maintenance that these things require, as they're not being used for doing the type of road work they were doing just a recent time ago. So on this car here, got to do some more suspension work above and beyond the rear suspension stuff. But we got front control arms to change out, because this thing rattles and clunks and makes all kinds of weird noises whenever you drive over anything but a flat, smooth, perfect surface. But looking at these control arms, they should be pretty simple to do. There's only two large bolts holding the things in place, one going up vertically into the K-member and one going horizontally, going through these bushings to hold them in place. These come with the lower ball joint, so, well, really it's only one ball joint on there, so get a good big bang for the buck here. You don't have to further install a ball joint or anything like that. This should be as simple as busting the old ball joint off and those two big bolts, and then bam bam. And the what do you call it thing, sway bar link probably will need to get disconnected too. We'll see in a second though when we go underneath. So let's go ahead and go underneath. All right, our initial observation here shows I don't have to worry about a sway bar link or anything. It's just the ball joint and the two bolts. One thing though I'm looking at that's going to make this probably interesting is the simple fact that this bolt right here, it comes out and it makes contact right with the back of the transmission. Now, first of all, how the hell am I going to get a doggone socket in there? Maybe a wrench? Who knows? Probably. But the way this garbage looks, I'm going to have to jack the damn engine and transmission up some in order to clear this, because even if I do get the bolt out with a wrench, the bolt is probably that long. That bolt is probably a good 4 inches long to go through this mounting point and the bushing to get to the other side. Get a spot about right here where my finger is pointing at. So that's going to be a long bolt. I'm not even going to be able to get the damn thing out. So yeah, I'm going to have to look at jacking the damn engine up enough to clear this stupid thing. At least the other bolt right here, let me zoom back out. At least the other bolt here should not be as bad. It's right under there. I could get a socket on there and bam, pull that out. Yeah, let's see what the hell we can do with that. Already becoming interesting. I started off by loosening the bolts on that rear transmission mount, the one that's a pain in the ass to get to. I didn't want to just fully pull the bolts free, so we wouldn't have a problem trying to line all that garbage back up after the fact. But I loosened them enough and jacked up the transmission side a little ways. Didn't really get the kind of clearance I was hoping for. Get under here and we'll look. We're still in a compromising spot here, but for reference, it's a 19 millimeter bolt that might be a pain in the butt to get off, because depending on whether your car had any work done, this bolt might be stuck on there pretty good. But I'm gonna loosen this thing and see what we're working with to see if I have to do anything else to get this garbage out. Don't know how the other side looks as far as the position of this bolt. I'm hoping that this is not going to be a repetition on that side where something is just flat out in the way. All right, as I stated, this is what we're working with, an extra long bolt that is obstructed by the transmission, or more accurately, the transmission oil pan. Now, come to a little crossroads here. I could probably remove the oil pan by just pulling out these few little 10mm bolts, or 11, I don't know what the hell they are, probably 10s. But I could remove the oil pan and get the clearance necessary to pull this thing down without having to more than likely pull a bunch of motor mount bolts free and free the engine up to jack the thing all the way up to clear everything. Or, like I said, remove all the motor mount bolts to be able to jack this thing up. Now, if anybody's got any other insight as to how to remedy this little problem right here, hey, drop it in the comments, because I'm sure we're all curious. But yeah, I'm gonna have to sit back and analyze everything real quick, and I will get back to you shortly. Okay, my decision, I'm pulling off the transmission pan. Why? Because the amount of garbage that I'll have to pull off in order to remove the motor mount bolts so I could just get this stupid thing up about a ½ inch far exceeds what it's going to take to pull this transmission pan off. So we're going to go off on a tangent on removing a transmission pan on a 2007 Scion. As stated before, all these bolts around here looks like about maybe 15 of them, give or take. I'll count them when I pull them, but they're all 10mm. There's also a drain plug right here that uses an Allen wrench of 10mm as well. So first, need to drain the oil out of here as much as possible. Then go ahead and remove all these little bitty bolts around here. So go ahead and get that knocked out, and we'll see how many bolts it is. Stand by. All right, we got our pan off. It is 18 10mm bolts holding that thing up. But as we can clearly see, we have clearance now to pull our bolt out. Stupid ass design, but this was the easier way to do it, because to reverse all this, just got to put the pan back on and put the oil back in. Make sure you use a clean pan when you drain your oil so you can recycle the oil, unless you're just trying to do all this garbage in one shot, which might make sense in some circles. Could have replaced the filter and all that stuff at the same time, but yeah, whatever. If you feel like it, you can get a good look at the inside of your transmission just to see what's going on in there for shits and giggles. But we're working on control arms, so let's get back to pulling this trash off. This pisses me off. On a lighter note, the vertical bolt holding this other end of the control arm in place is also a 19mm. There's a nut on the inside there that you'll have to hold on to in order to remove that thing. You're probably going to need a breaker bar unless you could get the clearance necessary to get an impact wrench on there and break that free. But go ahead and get that out, because the next thing is to get that ball joint broken free just as well. So let's get this knocked out. One thing to make note of in the process of removing this bolt, because of all the forces being exerted on this control arm, the control arm's probably going to shift a little bit to where it's going to put some resistance on this bolt, so you're probably not going to be able to just pull the thing out easily. You're going to have to use force, or you're going to have to get everything freed up from the control arm in order to do that. Now, even though we're replacing the ball joint with the control arm, instead of just trying to knock the ball joint completely out, I'm actually going to disconnect the ball joint from the control arm. That bolt right there, let's focus in, that's a 15mm. These nuts right here are 18mm. Once we get the control arm free, I can then go ahead and put a 19mm on this castle nut right here, holding the ball joint to the knuckle, and then I can go ahead and beat on the knuckle to try to shock that ball joint out. Worst case will be putting a fork on the ball joint to bust it completely free. So go ahead and start taking stuff apart, starting with these ball joint bolts and nuts right here, 15 and 18. All right, got got the control arm freed up from the ball joint, had to use a big flathead screwdriver to work out this front bushing area right here. So the next thing is probably going to be to use a hammer to slowly work this side out enough so that I can go ahead and remove the entire control arm. So I'll go ahead and continue with that work and get our ball joint off just as well. One little thing to make note of when you're moving around this whole spindle assembly on your shock or strut is making sure that your CV axle doesn't fully pull out from that inner knuckle. Otherwise, you're going to have to work that thing back into that portion of the CV axle, which, I don't know, it's just an extra bit of headache that you'll have to contend with when you're moving all this junk around. So, back to work. All right, we're completely freed up. Our old control arm is out. Our ball joint is also out. We have our new unit right here ready to rock and roll and slide on in here. So I'm going to go ahead and work this thing on in here, and probably going to involve a little bit of tapping and stuff to get it all lined up. I'll get it in here and bolt this trash back together. All right, we got our new control arm in place. You will actually have to dislocate that CV axle, but it's not really that big of a deal. You just kind of work it until the knuckle slides back in place. But you're going to have to do that in order to clear this out, unless you feel like disassembling the strut and the entire spindle, which that's up to you if you want to pop out extra nuts and bolts and stuff to get the clearance you need. It's a lot easier to reseat that CV axle. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one bolt in place, and then I'll line up that other bolt back there and get that in, and then get our ball joint in. All right, one little tip to help make this go a little bit smoother: focus on this back bolt first, because when even if you do get this thing lined up enough to where you can get the bolt started on this bottom hole right here, the bolt's going to be in at a slight angle and you'll never get the top hole lined up. I ended up having to take my jack off the transmission and put it under the control arm and jack it up against our sway bar here and get the control arm level enough that I could do light taps against the control arm to get the top bolt hole lined up. I had to gauge that by feel because, well, you can't get your head in there to see where the holes are lining up. But once I got the bolt in part way through the bottom hole and got everything level, I was able to feel that I was close enough in alignment with the holes that I was able to tap the bolt the rest of the way through and up to the top so I could get the nut on. But like I said, focus on this back bolt. Do not put anything on the front bolt or the ball joint, or you'll never get this garbage to line up. So now that I got that bolt in, now I can go ahead and use my screwdriver to pry and wedge the front bushing to align it to get that bolt in, and then get our ball joint in and wrap this garbage up. All right, we got everything bolted back up. Like I said again, that bolt goes first so you could get everything manipulated to line the bushing up enough to get the bolt all the way through and tighten down with the nut on the inside. Then that other bolt right there, you'll be better able, get over there, that bolt right there, you'll be more easily able to use a large screwdriver to work the bushing into alignment with the hole so you can get that bolt through and tighten down. Of course, don't forget to put your jack back up under the transmission to get it high enough to clear everything. And once that's torqued down, then you can go ahead and move everything around to get the ball joint in place and get the castle nut on there and the retaining pin in place. Now, and of course in the process you're going to have to reseat that inner knuckle on your CV axle after moving all this garbage around. So now with this side all done, I'm going to go ahead and put my transmission oil pan back up so we can conclude this side and then see what the other side has to offer. So stand by. All right, we got our oil pan back on. We also tightened up the nuts and bolts on that rear motor mount So all that stuff is done. Everything else is done. Our control arm is now fully installed along with the ball joint. So now move on to the other side. Okay, the right side is not as bad as the left side, but still a close second, obviously. I still had to jack up the engine on the right side to get the oil pan a little bit high enough that I could get a short socket onto that bolt. I should be able to get that bolt to clear enough to get it all the way out. The left side, no problem. And of course the ball joint. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this bolt all the way as much as possible. See what happens. See what this has. Of course we get to fight this thing again, just like on the other side. Unlike the other side, I can't see me pulling a whole oil pan off. That would be ridiculous. Okay. That was actually kind of painless. So now we can move along, get the rest of this garbage taken loose here and out of this car. Stand by. Looking at this right control arm, we can clearly see this thing would have been a culprit in making some of the noise, because that front bushing is shredding itself with excessive movement. Then looking at this bushing right here, you could see how it's pretty much tearing on that side as well as right there. Now, I might have had to use a screwdriver to work that thing to be able to demonstrate that, but just imagine the force multiplied, who knows by who knows how much, with the 1.5 tons of car being supported by that thing. So with that arm out, we'll go ahead and put our new one in. Just like with the other side, I had to put the jack underneath the control arm to get it level enough so I could guide that rear bolt into place, so I could get it all the way up through both points on the K member, so I could get the nut in place to secure it. So just to let you know, expect the same thing on this side, sans removing oil pans. Let me finish this crap up. All right, we got our second control arm in place. Everything is secured as it's supposed to be. Our ball joint's in. Our front and rear bolts on the arm are in. The CV axle knuckle is seated properly. We're off of our oil pan here, and the engine and transmission are at rest. Everything is good now. So with that, we can pretty much conclude this whole job involving replacing control arms on the front. So at that rate, there's other little stuff we need to address on here. But for now, we're going to stick with the control arms on this segment. So as usual, like, subscribe, notifications, TikTok, all that good stuff. Stay tuned for more car crap and any other crap that we might decide to work on around here. Stay tuned for more work on this car, because there will be more work on this car to do. So till the next time, I'm gonna clear this area, get from under this thing, and pick another car to work on. So I'll catch you later. I'm done.